It's really great today to have Tim Harris, who is the president and CEO of the Insurance Board. The Insurance Board is one of our financial missions nationally and provides insurance to churches in our denomination as well as some other affiliated denominations. So Tim took the reins at the Insurance Board in 2013. Prior to that, he worked for Arthur Gallagher and Company, a national company where he brokered property and casualty insurance for large commercial and public entity clients. He has more than 30 years of experience in the insurance industry, including senior leadership positions with both insurers and brokers over the course of his career. Tim he also served in the United States Army Reserve, and to show that he is in fact a certified smart guy, is a graduate of the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned his bachelor's in economics and with concentration in risk management and insurance. And he's also a Chartered Property Casualty Underwriter. So very well credentialed and a smart guy. Tim's married, has 3 kids, and is the moderator of the Avon Lake United Church of Christ in Avon Lake, Ohio. So he is intimately connected with the UCC right down to his where he lives. He spends much of his time outside of the office doing volunteer work. He's a director of Save Our Children, a nonprofit in Ohio. He has served on the University Hospitals Cleveland Medical Center Board of Directors, as well as a supporting organization for the hospitals. And he's a board member of the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission, and a past chair of the Community Foundation of Lorain County. So he's very giving of his time as well as in and out of work. On a personal note, I've known Tim pretty much since he joined the Insurance Board, originally having met him through my involvement with the Association of Conference Attorneys. And I have to say that Tim holds up very well under the withering questioning of a room full of attorneys curious about insurance matters and claims and issues related to their respective clients. More recently, as I have served on the board of directors of the Insurance Board, I've gotten to see Tim in action close up. And we're very fortunate to have him leading the Insurance Board. And his stewardship of the IB has been excellent. And he's been leading us through some very difficult times and capably so. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tim with my deepest thanks, Tim, for sharing your wisdom and insights on the Insurance Board with us today.
Well, thank you, Andy, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. And Lori, thank you for the invitation to participate in this meeting. I am happy to be here and looking forward to sharing with each of you a little bit of insight into what's happening in the property and liability insurance marketplace. Increasingly, I'm getting a lot of questions from individuals as they see their insurance premiums going up and really wondering what is happening in the insurance marketplace that is affecting insurance rates and insurance premiums. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you this afternoon, sharing some thoughts with you on that. I have a slide show that I will begin with. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or type them in the chat, and we will address those as promptly as possible. And also at the end of my presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask additional questions if anyone has them. So at any point in time, if you have any questions about any of the terminology that's on the slide, because some of it is insurance speak, if you will, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask me, and I'll be happy to explain what the terminology might mean. So the first thing I'm going to do is just give you a quick update on coronavirus as it relates to the Insurance Board, how many claims we've seen, how many we've paid, what we anticipate. I'll talk a little bit about our denominational participation. As Andy mentioned, we have a number of denominations in the program. We have 5 mainline Protestant denominations and a partner in mission with the United Church of Christ that participate in the program. and only those ecumenically aligned churches are able to participate in insurance board insurance program. Talk a little bit about the claim and industry backdrop. What's happening in the industry that is driving the pricing? What factors are out there that are impacting the rates that you're seeing, not just from insurance board, but across the industry? Water everywhere. Water is one of those perils that we are seeing increasingly among our churches. We'll continue. I'll talk about additional claim trends that we're seeing within the insurance board. I'll share with you our results from 2013 to 2020, just to give you a sense for the headwinds, if you will, that we are facing. And then I'll have an opportunity to share some reflections, some things that we're doing to mitigate the incidence of claims, and to open it up for any questions that you might have. And again, if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to let me know. So coronavirus. We've had about 45 total property claims related to coronavirus, about $42,000. It's not been a lot of money, as you can see. And the largest reason for that is there are several conditions that have to apply in order for the coronavirus coverage under the policy to actually trigger. And the coronavirus coverage under the policy really is under the communicable disease section of the insurance policy, as with other insurance policies in the industry. Some of the language on those policies differs, but I think in a lot of cases, you'll find that these conditions tend to be fairly consistent across the board. We have one general liability claim. We don't expect that to be significant at all. And again, the majority of the claims just did not meet the definition of communicable disease, and I will go ahead and or the communicable disease coverage, I'll go ahead and share that with you here in this next slide. So in order for coverage to apply, there had to be an outbreak at the insured's premises described in the memorandum of insurance. So that's essentially the coverage summary that you get from insurance board. The outbreak needed to be caused directly by an infectious or bacterial organism, which would be a communicable disease, which would obviously apply to COVID. And there has to be an order from a local, state, or federal Department of Health to either temporarily or permanently shut down your entire operations. And the order has to be the direct result of an outbreak at the insured premises. So it can't just be a precautionary measure where the Department of Health says that you have to shut down in anticipation of what might happen at your premises. This actually has to result from an actual outbreak at your church or ministry. And as a result of that, a local regulatory agency comes in and says, we have to shut your church down because of it. And as a result of that, you suffer some type of financial loss. And those conditions would apply. If all three of those conditions applied, then coverage would likely be available to you. But in a lot of cases, churches shut down kind of as a preemptive measure to make sure that we protected our parishioners against the spread of COVID-19 versus actually having the COVID situation or outbreak emanate directly from the church. Now, we've had a few of those situations where there was a condition in the church or a spread that was traced back to the church, and in some of those cases, coverage actually did apply because the local authority came in and actually shut the church down or ministry down as a result of it. Now, that was the good news. The bad news is that because there have been so many unintended consequences as a result of the coronavirus outbreak, the pandemic that we had, a pandemic unlike many that we've had, obviously, in local memory. We're talking going back 100 or so years to when we had our last situation. Because of the unintended consequences, many insurers are now excluding coverage for communicable disease because some courts have broadly interpreted how coverage should apply in situations where it was not anticipated. Now, for us, as much as we would love to continue to provide the communicable disease coverage, unfortunately, we are not able to buy reinsurance, excess insurance to provide protection for us in the event that we had a rash of communicable disease claims. So from that standpoint, we are no longer able to actually provide it under our policy. And that is really something that's happening across the industry today. It is very difficult to actually go out and find coverage for communicable disease that is reasonable and most of us would consider affordable today. So just to highlight the denominations in the program, I mentioned 5 mainline Protestant denominations. All of these denominations you'd be familiar with: the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Presbyterian Church USA, the ELCA, and the RCA. In 4 of those churches, the UCC, the PCUSA, the ELCA, and the RCA are part of what's known as a formula of agreement. They are formally ecumenically aligned churches. And when you add the Christian Church, those 5 denominations are in full communion with one another. So, well, at least full communion with the United Church of Christ. And that really serves as the basis for allowing us to be able to offer coverage to those denominations. As a nonprofit organizations, we are considering ourselves an association of churches, association of closely ecumenically aligned churches. The Alliance of Baptists is not a formal denomination, but a partner in mission with the United Church of Christ. So they also qualify as a denominational partner eligible for coverage under the program. And how that breaks out, the UCC, right now we have about 2,400 out of the 4,500 churches in the program are UCC churches, a little over 50%. And you see how it splays out there with the PCUSA, the Disciples of Christ. The ELCA and RCA came into the program, I believe, in 2018. And the Alliance of Baptists we added into the program, I think, I think I'm getting my dates right, in somewhere around 2016 or so. But the Disciples of Christ, the Presbyterian Church USA, and UCC go back to 2009 and prior. Those 3 denominations were in the program, which is why those numbers are a little bit higher than the other denominations. You also will note that the PCUSA is one of the bigger denominations in this mix of churches, and actually one of the fastest growing denominations in the program today. But we have great participation amongst our churches and hoping to continue to gain inroads with the ELCA churches and the RCA churches as time goes forward. You note when you look at the change column at the very bottom there, it says 0.5%. We were not able to really grow in 2020. As you can imagine, nobody was knocking on doors during the pandemic, and we really did not have the ability to add churches to the program. So our growth was pretty substantially impacted. And I'll provide a chart on the subsequent pages that show what our growth has been historically over the past 6 years or so. And obviously the pandemic had taken a very, very big toll on our ability to actually add churches and participants to the program. In Hawaii, we have about 100 churches representing about $304 million of value that we insure. I think we have about just under $2 million of premium across the churches in Hawaii. This was at the end of December 2020. So what's happening? You may recall the things that I'm about to mention to you because they've been in the news and we've kind of heard about these over the years. It's sometimes easy to forget all of the things that have taken place since 2016 or so, but you might remember 2016 and even prior, we were, hurricane season was starting to ramp up and we're starting to see much more activity. It was, for the insurance board, the worst property and liability loss year in the history of our program. I mean, we just had a number of things that happened that year, including hurricanes that really elevated the amount of loss that we historically pay in 1 year, and that was on the property side and the liability side. And you expect to have, you know, those years where you have anomalies where you just have a bad year. But as you'll see in the slides that follow, there's been a trend. The trend is continuing to produce an inordinate amount of claim activity, more than we've seen in the past. 2017, we had Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, Maria. Those were the three of those hurricanes were the costliest in U.S. history. In 2019, we started off the year with a tornado that ended up being about $4.3 million. I mean, I don't really recall too many times in our history where we had tornadoes starting out at the beginning of the year, where we typically think we're in winter season. We're actually seeing more and more tornadic activity down in the southeast part of the country, more so than we've seen before. 2016 through 2019 was the costliest 4-year stretch of hurricanes in U.S. history, according to NOAA. And that really tells a pretty grim story when it comes to windstorm, climate change, and the activity that we're seeing from the standpoint of Atlantic hurricane season. On the heels of 2019, we saw 2020, which was the most active U.S. hurricane season on record. So just when you think it can't get any worse, it just gets worse. 2020, we also saw 10.3 million acres burned. 5 of the top 20 largest California wildfires happened last year in 2020. We had a Midwest derecho, which is a straight line windstorm that came through the Midwest, and it ended up being the year where we had the most retained losses in our captive. So even though we had a really bad year in 2016, some of those losses were actually pushed off to our excess carriers. So all insurance companies buy insurance as well for those catastrophic incidents. So insurance companies retain a certain layer of insurance losses, and then, you know, they buy insurance, which is called reinsurance or excess insurance, for those catastrophic situations where they have a really bad year. In 2016, some of those losses were pushed off to excess carriers. In 2020, much of that loss was retained by our captive. And a lot of people had said to us, you know, why haven't you given churches a break in 2020 during the pandemic? I said, well, you know, in 2020, we actually had a lot of really bad property losses. Even though churches weren't in session, we still had fires, we still had hurricanes, we still had wildfires out in the Midwest, straight line windstorms, hail damage. All of that continued to happen in spite of the pandemic. This slide I will blow up, but our broker actually provides an analysis every year, every quarter, that talks about insurance rates. And you see the headline there. It says global insurance prices rise for the 12th consecutive quarter. And I blew that up. And it says global commercial insurance prices rose 20% in the third quarter of 2020. So in addition to all of the things that are happening in the environment relative to our losses, we're actually getting hit by higher prices from the insurance companies from whom we buy insurance. Their prices were going up 20% in the third quarter of 2020 at a time when we're actually preparing to buy insurance for our January 1 renewal. The program renews January 1. So all of these things are kind of coming together at one time. Things that are happening in the environment with claims, and then commercial insurance prices on top of that going up at levels that we haven't seen in a long time. You see in their report there on the screen, the third quarter rise in pricing was the largest year-over-year increase in their global insurance market index since its inception back in 2012. So since 2012, this has been the largest increase in a quarter of rates. And you can kind of see that graphically illustrated there. The third quarter of 2020, commercial property insurance rates, which again affect us because we have to buy property and casualty insurance on an excess basis. Those prices were going up just as we're rounding the corner into renewal. Water everywhere. This has been a disturbing trend that we have seen among our churches across the country. And what this amounts to is these are water damage claims not related to flood, for example, but claims that involve water intrusion into a church or ministry that is not necessarily related to physical damage to the property. So, for example, if you went outside and you looked at the roof, all the shingles are still on, but guess what? Water somehow is getting into the church. Or this could be a broken or frozen pipe, or this could be a broken appliance, a toilet leaking. Those types of things have been on the increase over the last several years. And you can see just by the numbers we have paid since 2015, more than $25 million just in these claims alone. That cost is, if you look to the lower right-hand corner there, adds about $1,000 to, on average, to every church's premium. So we have to figure out how to get our arms around these types of claims. And these claims we consider to be largely preventable. Oftentimes they're precipitated by deferred maintenance to a church. A church decides not to make those roof repairs. You get leakage into the sanctuary. Leaks onto the organ or other electronic equipment. Those things become expensive items that we have to pay. And again, you look at the outside of the facility and you can't necessarily see anything, any exterior defect in the facility, but you know that there's water intrusion that's coming into the premises. And if you notice in 2019 and 2020, the cost of those claims is, again, starting to tick up. We had a bad year in 2015, but 2019 and 20, the trend of those claims and the average cost of those claims starting to, again, go on the rise. So if you look at water and all of the other perils that we typically would consider on the property side, fire and tornado, windstorm and hail, water is the most prevalent claim that we have paid on both a cumulative basis and a frequency basis. So you see, we've paid over 1,100 claims since 2015 for water damage, and every claim averages about $21,000. That is 32.8, almost 33% of the frequency of claims that we have out of the 3,600 since 2015, and it represents almost 25 a quarter of the total claims that we have paid since 2015 are water damage related. And you can imagine if we can just make an impact in reducing the incidence of water damage claims in churches, it would have a dramatic impact on the amount of premiums that we would have to charge to our churches. So we're really aggressively looking at how we can help churches mitigate the incidence of water damage losses. You know, you can't help a hailstorm, a windstorm comes through, you can't help that. But the water damage claims largely are claims that can be either prevented or mitigated. And we're really working to see how we can help churches do that. Some of the claim trends, I will just show you graphically. And here's a slide that has some terms on it, and I'll try to explain. Ultimates, when you look at ultimates, that's an actuary's estimate of what our ultimate claims are going to be in any given year. So like any insurance company, we use actuaries to help us estimate what our claims are going to be in any given year. And they develop those claims out. So after you have a claim, they still look at those claims to determine if they're going to go higher. And oftentimes the claims, you know, an adjuster will give you an estimate of the value when they first go out and take a look at your damage. But that damage actually could get higher as they start to fix it and start to work on the property. They realize, well, there's more things here. This claim is actually a little higher than we anticipated. So the actuaries help us to figure out what those claims will ultimately end up being, and they give us a value for that. And that's how we price our product. That's how we buy insurance, on that basis of their estimates. And you'll see that in 2015, when you look across all of the lines of insurance that we provide, property, general liability, employee dishonesty coverage. We provide coverage for directors and officers liability, abuse prevention, sexual abuse and misconduct coverage. When you look across all of those lines, the actuaries estimated that we would have about $15 million of claims across the board there. If you look in 2020, that estimate has gone up to almost $28 million of claims. And I'll tell you, we've grown, that's 84.4% increase. We've grown the program about 24% since 2015. So you figure that that those claims aren't just the result of adding churches. Something else is going on here with the claims inflation. When you look just at property, they estimated our property claims alone would be about almost $12 million. And if you look at the end of 2020, the estimate is $23 million. We had about $23 million of claims in 1 year, in 2020. That is almost double where we were in 2015. So we are facing a trend of claims inflation that we are working very diligently to get our arms around. And obviously, to the extent that claims continue to rise, we have to then pass on some of that cost to our constituent churches in order to manage through the process. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail on the following slides. UCIC is our captive. It's United Church Insurance Company. That's our insurance company. And again, they increased almost 85% from 2015, and property claims nearly doubled. In 2020, if you skip down to the third bullet there, our total cost of risk, that's the amount of money that we actually put into our insurer every year, plus the amount of insurance that we have to buy, that amount went up $12 million in 1 year alone. And we can't just absorb $12 million in 1 year without something having to give, either cutting back coverage, passing additional cost on to churches, or letting some churches go out of the program. Something has to happen in order for us to be able to manage through that $12 million, because that's a pretty substantial amount of increase in any given year. So we've been able to actually moderate the costs of some of these increases because we have a fair amount of surplus within the organization, within our captive. So we've done that. We've used that surplus to moderate the increases. We haven't completely passed those increases on to the churches. And you can see here that in 2014, the average cost premium per church was about $11,000. And you see that at the end of 2020, it was only slightly higher at 11.7, almost $11.8 thousand. So the cost actually per church actually did not go up that much from 2014 to 2020. I know sometimes it seems that way, but when you look across our entire portfolio, you'll see at the very bottom, we had a 6.1% average price increase in 2014. But because we actually had a really good year in 2014, really good year in 2015, we actually reduced rates for the churches on average. And you see those price reductions there. In 2017, we actually started to lose money. I mentioned 2016 was a bad loss year. So we had to start getting some of that price back. We started raising rates, and we thought, we can buffer some of this with surplus. Again, as a nonprofit financial ministry of the church, that was one of our objectives. And we also thought some of these claim spikes were not going to persist, that the claims would actually come down, and we'd have the ability to moderate how much price increase we would pass on to churches. Well, that did not happen, as I showed you on that prior slide. So we continue to have to move rates upward. In 2020, we took a 9% jump. We thought 9% might kind of head off the amount of loss that we were seeing in the additional claims activity. Again, anticipating that we might be in a little more of a favorable environment as we move forward. Again, that did not happen. And 2021, we had to take a pretty dramatic action as a result of both the cost increase that I mentioned in terms of the cost of insurance that we buy and the claims experience that we were seeing in terms of the amount of claims that we were paying, claim dollars that we were paying. We had to actually pass on about a 22% rate increase to the churches, which was pretty significant. And you see the average premium per church change since 2014 has actually been just under 26% in over 8 years. That really represents only an average annual premium increase of about 3.5%. And we always push our total insured values up for our churches by about 2% a year, because there's always cost inflation when you go in to fix a property. Those costs always go up. So we adjust the costs on the buildings about 2% a year. And that cost is actually factored into that 3.5%. So we've tried to really keep rates moderated, but we're getting into a point where trying to do that is getting harder and harder. In the absence of claims improving dramatically, we're going to have to pass that cost on to churches in the form of price increases. And as an extension of the church ministry, we have attempted to moderate those increases, as I mentioned, anticipating more favorable climate. The trends have continued to get bad, and our long-term sustainability really hinges on our ability to get the price increases that we need to in order to manage those claims and those cost trends that we're seeing in the absence of significant claim improvement. So unless the claims trends actually start to retreat and come down, we're going to have to figure out a way to pass those costs on to the churches, or do something else, which those other alternatives we hate to do, such as reduce the amount of coverage that we provide or something similar to that. We provide a very broad product to the churches. We believe that the product that we provide is one of the best in the industry at protecting our churches and our affiliated ministries, church ministry. So we are doing what we can to try to moderate those costs without raising prices too much. But you get to a point where without claims actually improving, we have to be able to push those costs off to the churches. And in addition to that, we need to work with the churches to try to figure out ways that we can help to mitigate the cost of claims. Now, some of the things that we're doing are increasing deductibles. We've increased deductibles. You know, we used to allow pretty much any church that wanted to have $1,000 deductible to keep their $1,000 deductible. That's the lowest deductible that we offered. But we've decided that if you're a larger church, it really makes sense for you to actually carry a higher deductible than $1,000, because it costs us about $1,000 just to open up a claim file. So we've started to raise deductibles on some of the larger churches across our portfolio to make it a little more equitable. Also, we believe that if you have a big church property, there are likely a lot more things that can go wrong, and it just makes more sense for you to retain a little more of or share in a little more of that cost. We're also requiring water sensors for churches that have had past water damage claims. We believe that these water sensors will help us to be able to identify and mitigate the incidence of water damage claims going forward. And as you saw on a prior slide, we've paid $25 million in these types of claims, which adds about $1,000 a year to every church's premium. And if we have the ability to use water sensors to help to mitigate that cost, it actually has the immediate benefit of bringing down the cost of the insurance premiums. So we're working right now with an outside company that is an expert in water sensor technology. We have actually had, I believe our loss control director mentioned, we just started this program in 2021. We've already had over $500,000 worth of water saves as a result of the sensors. And I believe, again, that if we extrapolate that out and get more and more churches to use water sensors, and I believe that if you look across the industry, you will start to see that many insurers are going to require water sensors for churches. We're not the only organization that is seeing these types of claims. When I talk to our reinsurers, our excess insurers, they are seeing the same thing across the industry. Aging infrastructure, for example, is leading to all kinds of water types of incidences within organizations, not just churches. So we're really thinking that this is a start in the right direction to helping us mitigate these claims. We're also working on a tiering program, which will help churches by categorizing them, putting them into tiers. So we're going to be sending out a survey to churches in the next few months, and we're going to detail certain risk criteria that we feel is indicative of some of the best churches that we have in the program, and trying to get churches to mirror those activities and those behaviors. And if they do that, they're going to be able to have the best coverage, terms, conditions, and pricing under the program. The churches that are not meeting those criteria will likely have a little bit higher costs. And again, the purpose of the program is to support and protect ministry. And we need everybody to participate together in order to be able to do that effectively. We can't have churches that are not doing their absolute best to help mitigate the incidence of loss in their congregations. And that's both on the property side and on the liability side. For example, we had a large church fire in 2016, which was about $15 million. And it was a result of a contractor doing work on the roof. Well, it turns out that the contractor actually wasn't supposed to be doing the type of work that they were doing on the roof, and they didn't have adequate insurance. And as a result of that, we had no ability to get recourse from the roofing contractor's insurer to mitigate the cost of that roof claim. So we have to make sure that our churches are doing what they can to make sure that they're when they're contracting with vendors, that they have appropriate indemnification language in contracts to make sure that they're protecting themselves, that they see that a contractor is providing a certificate of insurance with adequate insurance limits to be able to protect you, the church, and us in the event that there is a bad situation that happens. And in that situation, again, about a $15 million claim for that church, which that cost gets passed on to all of the churches in the program. So we're trying to work with churches to adopt best practices, policies, procedures, controls, and we believe that that will also help to mitigate the incidence of some of these claim trends that we're seeing. We also changed our brokerage relationship. We actually also have a broker that helps us to negotiate with those excess insurers and reinsurers. We worked to restructure our program in 2020 for 2021, which we did. It did help to bring down some of the costs that we were paying. And again, hoping that with some of the loss control measures that we're taking, we're able to impact some of those claim trends. This again directly benefits the churches in terms of lower costs for everyone. We also managed costs this year through managing attrition with our staff. We also gave our staff no raises for 2020. Obviously, the pandemic was a very tough year. It was also a very tough year for us financially. We lost on a consolidated basis about $5.3 million in 2020. So that's a pretty significant loss for insurance board. It really wiped out all the gains that we'd made in the program since 2013. When you look at the loss trends that we've had. But our strong financial position has enabled us to absorb these losses, providing a considerable subsidy to the churches in the program. And I know that churches don't always see that subsidy, but understand that we are actually, we are as a financial ministry, and Andy will certainly attest to this as a board member, that we really work hard to make sure that we're trying to mitigate any cost impact to the churches that we can. And in some of those cases, since 2015, we have actually been subsidizing the cost for the churches by absorbing some losses because we had a significant amount of surplus. And we believe that that's been our mission to do so. However, our mission also is around sustainability and being a viable program for the churches for a long time. When this program was conceived back in the 80s, churches had a difficult time finding insurance. And we do not want to be in a situation where that happens and churches don't have insurance board as an alternative. We want to be able, and not necessarily an alternative, but a primary option. We like to be the first choice for the churches. But we do things that other commercial insurers don't do. We have always endeavored to take as many churches in the program as we can. We don't charge late fees. We don't charge premium installment fees. Churches cancel 100 times and we reinstate them 100 times as long as they pay their premiums. We try to do what we can to offer a very flexible program for the churches. We offer most of our loss control services to the churches for free. Even if you don't buy insurance from us, you still have the ability to go on our website and use the loss control resources that we provide to the churches. So it is a ministry of the church. That's how we look at it. But at the same time, we have to be sustainable. And unfortunately, given the environment and the cost changes as precipitous as they've been, in addition to the claim trends, we have to pass some of that cost on to the churches. So historical results, and this will kind of give you a graphic illustration of what I'm referring to here. You see, when I showed you the ultimate losses in the program for all lines, you see where that number has gone from 2015 of 15 million, and how that number now at the end of 2020 is about 27, almost $28 million. And on the property side, going from just under $12 million, which I shared on a prior slide, to more than $23 million in 2020. You see how that directly correlates to the amount of net income that we've been able to generate. You see that as the losses have gone up, we have gone into the red. So 2014, 2015, or 2013, 2014, 2015, where the losses were $13 to $15 million, we were able to make a decent amount of money in the program. That money helps to stabilize it helps us to build our surplus, and it also helps to stabilize rates. But you see, from 2016 to 2020, we have actually not made money in the program. That's because we have subsidized the cost for the churches, and thinking, claims will come down, we'll be able to moderate. You see, from 2017 to 2018, where the ultimate actually dropped a bit, you see that our net income actually got close to break even. But then you see in 2019 that it actually jumped back up again, and you see that our losses also went back up. So in the absence of having losses reduced, we have to be able to get that money from somewhere. And the only place that we can really get it from is in charging more premium to the churches to cover those losses. And that's what we're unfortunately seeing. And then in 2020, in addition to just having bad claim experience, we had a horrendous market change where the prices in the commercial insurance market jumped 20% on top of the claims experience, which really generated that substantial loss in 2020. And we're working to get those numbers back on track. And this really is a depiction of how having the net income impacted our rates. You see, we made money 2013, 2014, 2015. And you see that we then started to reduce the rates because we never want to be in a situation where we have too much surplus. I mean, that is possible. We want to balance between making too much money and how much we charge the churches. So we started to dial back the rates a little bit. But then you see that we started to lose again. So we started to have to start the trend up of raising the rates. We moderately in the very beginning, again, thinking claim trends might change. We had the reduction of, we had almost a break-even loss in 2018. So we kind of dialed it back a little bit, just kept it there at the 2%, just under 3% level. And we had a little bit of a spike in 2019 again, and then 2020. And obviously that rolled into 2021, generating the 22% price increase. So we're hoping for better things. We can use a lot of prayers to help us with the claim situation. I'm already looking at hurricane outlook, and they predict 2021 to be an active hurricane season, not as active as last year, but still active. And we see that there are dry conditions still in the Pacific Southwest, that always leads to fires. So we're constantly monitoring what's happening in the environment, and hoping that we can literally weather the storm for the duration of the year. So reflections, again, premiums are a direct reflection of losses in the program and the commercial insurance industry factors. So we don't operate in a vacuum. We have to actually go out into the commercial marketplace and buy insurance. So if the commercial insurance environment is experiencing distress, which based on all of those things that I listed for you, all the hurricane activity, the Midwest storms, the tornadic activity, hailstorms are on the rise. The industry as a whole is experiencing distress. So when we go out to buy insurance, our costs actually go up as well. Reducing losses by insured participants directly impacts premium costs. So really, messaging this year, lower the risk, lower the cost at your church. So we're really hoping to help the churches lower their risk, which then translates to lower costs for everyone. Increasingly, the claims are being exacerbated by deferred maintenance. So if churches decide, the organ's more important than the roof, well, the organ certainly is more appealing than the roof, but the roof still has to be fixed as well, because that's part of the ministry. And if the roof isn't maintained, it actually ends up costing the church in the long run, and those costs get borne by all the churches in the program. And some churches have acknowledged that they use insurance as a way to cover costs of deferred maintenance, because they just don't have big budgets. We know that churches are struggling. We know that collection plates aren't necessarily spilling over with donations and stewardship. So churches have to figure out ways to manage that cost. And sometimes insurance is an easy call to make to see if maybe this water intrusion that we're having is insurance related and not maybe maintenance related. Those things all again contribute to additional costs in the system. Claim trends at the levels identified certainly weren't anticipated. We did not anticipate the level of activity, and you saw just it is disturbing to see what those trends have been over time, and those trends are outpacing the growth. We can't grow fast enough to cover to generate additional dollars in the program. The claim trends are outpacing premium costs and growth. So it's something that we obviously have to pay very close attention to. And the pandemic will continue to put pressure on our ability to grow, because again, we're just starting to open back up. Maybe folks are starting to knock on doors to see if churches are interested in entertaining insurance board. But we anticipate that process will be slow for at least the foreseeable future. So we have about 10 minutes, and I am certainly open to any questions that anybody has. I know that's a lot of information, and I ran through it pretty quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Tim, this is Julie on the conference staff.
Yes.
We had a question that's come in. The background for this question is we have churches in our associations which have had UCC Insurance Board insurance for a while now. However, some of those churches have clergy who decline or refuse to be in relationship with the UCC. They won't seek any kind of standing or authorization for their ministry. So the question is, does the UCC insurance policy still cover those churches if their clergy engage in illegal or immoral behavior?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Typically, if a pastor does not have standing within the denomination, the church is not eligible for coverage within insurance board. And the reason for that is really, as you enumerated, there is a process that pastors go through in order to obtain standing. And when we go out to actually buy insurance from the other insurance companies, they want to understand what controls we have in place when we are actually providing insurance to our churches. Are we just taking any church, or are we requiring that churches have some type of standards for how they call pastors, and if those pastors are held to some professional standards? And that is a big part of why we, if a pastor doesn't have standing or loses standing, why it makes the church ineligible for the program.
So I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
So as a follow-up question, should those who are in the know be informing the insurance board so that they can review whether or not to continue the church's insurance,
Yes.
especially as it regards the behavior of the clergy?
Yes, they should, because again, that behavior really does impact insurance coverage. Certainly, there could be any number of things that can arise from that situation that you mentioned. It's a great question. I actually get this question quite a bit. The church, because we know the churches can call anyone that they want to, but if they do so outside of the standing setting of the UCC or any of the denominations within our program, it really makes the program not eligible. So what we would like to do is have a conversation. Oftentimes we get a notification from Mesa that maybe if they know that the church called a pastor that doesn't have standing, or if a pastor loses standing, they will notify us. But there are sometimes in some situations where we just don't know or would have no way of knowing unless the church or someone who knew reached out to us to let us know that, because it is an important consideration. Now, if there's an opportunity for us to work through it with the church, we will absolutely work to do that. But if the church decides that that's the pastor they want and the pastor doesn't have standing, it does affect their ability to be in the program.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One question I had was really answered already. I noticed that the number of churches since 2013, I believe it is, has gone up by about 1,000 churches. And I wondered when a church, and you've answered a little bit of this, when a church approaches you to get insurance, do you decline some churches? Now, you said that standing was one issue. Are there other instances where you would just right from the get-go decide to decline coverage?
Yes. So we have always held the policy that we will endeavor to write all the churches, but there are certainly certain conditions where writing a church really jeopardizes the integrity of the program. So if we feel that a church brings an inordinate amount of risk to the program that would affect coverage for other participants in the program, for example, they have conditions at their premises that are dangerous, things that need to be corrected that haven't been, a whole lot of claims in a certain area, for example, yes, we might actually decline the church up front and not accept them into the program. So while we'll make that decision to try to take as many people as we can, if we feel like we can work through an issue or two, we will try to do that. But if there are certain conditions where the standing issue is a no up front, but there may be other conditions within the church that would prevent us from writing it. Yes.
So do you do some kind of an initial inspection as a basis for making that decision?
Possibly. It really depends on the size of the church. Now, we don't inspect every single church. We get an application from the church. We ask for loss runs. So we want to see a history. What is your history? And based on the way the application is filled out, we look at pictures also. Google is an amazing thing. So there's Google Earth and some other things that we have at our disposal where we can, maybe take a sneak peek of where the property is, where it's located. So we use a number of different factors to kind of make some preliminary decisions, conversations with the agent that is submitting the church. Why is the church coming to us? Or were there any problems? So we do some of that fact finding on the front end. And assuming that those questions are answered, reasonably and responsibly, and we don't see any red flags, we would tend to move forward with providing a quotation. Now, on some of the larger churches where there may be some things that we're not sure of, we would put them on an inspection list and try to get out there to see the church. Yes.
And the number of 1,000 churches increase just seems like a lot, although I'm new to this. And so is there any effort to stop the increase in the number of churches, thinking this might have something to do with the increase in the number of premiums? Or is your thinking that you just want to insure as many churches as possible?
So that's a great question. So, we do a really good job of screening the churches. We don't see that the new churches, for example, are generating the claims activity, and the old churches are better. We've actually looked across our book of churches, and we don't see any trends that suggest that the newest churches are the churches that are actually generating the claims. If you look at our growth over the last 5 years or 6 years, we've averaged just about 4% average annual growth. So it's not been a ton of growth every year. It's modest growth. We're not going out writing that 1,000 churches is over that 6-year period. It's not, all at once, for example. But I think we've done a pretty good job of, while we try to take all the churches, we do a pretty good job of screening out churches that are having some concerns. One of our biggest areas where we're really struggling today, for example, is church camps. Church camp exposure. We're seeing more claims with church camps, and we're really going to have to take a tougher look at how we insure church camps. But churches that are having hailstorm or windstorm issues, those are some things that you just can't control, other than saying we're not going to write any churches in Florida or in hurricane areas. Now, we do say that we want to limit the amount of churches that we're writing in places like places that are heavy in windstorm. So we absolutely do take those positions, but again, if a church comes to us and they meet all of our criteria, we still want to, as a ministry of the church, we still want to try to take those churches as much as possible.
And finally, I think this presentation is really excellent. And I wondered if you do any kind of sort of continuing education, I don't know what other term to use, where you make this kind of information available to the councils of the churches.
Well, we can certainly talk about anything you want me to do. We provided a number of resources on our website. I do present annually to the conference ministers at the annual meeting of the corporation. But I'm happy to do, my job is to serve you. So if there's an opportunity for me to provide some education, we are working on some continuing education things with the general counsel of the UCC. I know we have some things that we're working on with some of the attorneys, but some of that information we can also design for our churches specifically. And utilization of the resources is really critical for us. We are trying to make sure that our churches use the resources that we invest in to help them to mitigate the risk at their churches, for their congregations as well.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome, and thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
Tim, we have a question from Tino about how long it takes from the proof of loss being submitted to when the church is reimbursed for loss. And then Pualani and then Jane have questions for you. Okay.
Well, from the time of proof of loss to when a church gets paid, that process should not take very long at all. We try to advance money to the churches quickly. Usually there's two components. There's kind of that actual cash value component when the adjuster goes out and kind of takes inventory of the damage. They'll have an idea of how much of a check they can pretty much cut, right away within a few days. And then as the work is done, additional money is released, et cetera. But that process, if you're having an issue with that process, let me know, please, and I will make sure. But we've always tried to do a really good job of making sure that the churches are paid promptly. Travelers Insurance Company on the property side, their subsidiary is a company that we use to help us to adjust claims. And Travelers is a very well-known, very big insurance company, and they've done an excellent job with our claims. So if you're having an issue, please let me know. I will make sure it gets addressed promptly.
Okay, this one was a liability loss, not a property loss.
Okay, so once there has been a determination of a settlement, or it's adjudicated in a court of law and that amount is known, I mean, again, there should be no reason that that payment is not made promptly. And again, if you're having an issue with that, let me know. But yeah, I haven't heard of any issues with cutting a check. And I certainly do approve a lot of wires for money that is going to pay claims. So yeah, we once we know what that amount is, we cut the check right away.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for the wealth of information. What I wanted to ask you was, we are a small church of about 30 members.
Yes.
We've been working with the agent, but our premium, we need help with the premium because it went from $6,000 in 2017 to $11,000 last year, and now we're up to $12,000. We, in the past 6 months, we've tried to decrease it as much as we could, but the most we could decrease it to was $500. Is there any other, someone else who could help us understand this? Because the percentage you've given historically from 2014 does not relate to our insurance premium.
Yes.
Increase.
Yes, I would be happy to look into your specific situation. It could just require us to get an updated application from you. Maybe there's some things in there that obviously with a small congregation of your size, that the same exposures that existed when we first wrote you maybe don't exist today, or there's some other mitigating conditions that we can look at to reduce your pricing. But yeah, that's a pretty significant jump. It's double since 2017. That seems kind of high to me, unless there's claims or some other thing I can't understand. That seems a little bit high. I'd be happy to take a look at that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So do you have my contact information? You can certainly get it from the conference, and I'd be happy to help you through that.
Great. I'll get it through the conference. Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Tim, thank you for your presentation. It was a dose of reality. I really appreciate the transparency, talking especially about the challenges that you face and the rise of cost to local churches.
Thank you, Jane.
And I heard you ask for our prayers, so that will be taken seriously, I think, for
Yes.
you in your ministry and for the worry you do on our behalf. Rather than a question, I really have a comment. The presentation was aimed narrowly, and so to some people, especially if you don't have insurance from the insurance board, you may think, oh, well, maybe I don't want to look at them because of their recent track record. But I've been an interim pastor. I think this is now my 11th employment as an interim. Almost always during an interim, I will review the insurance policies of a church. I have never had the experience of a church finding better coverage for a better cost than with the insurance board. And I have sometimes helped a church realize that commercial coverage from one of the nationally known commercial insurers that we would recognize from television commercials is apples to apples, a very poor comparison to what we can get with insurance board. I especially love the website. There is a whole PhD education there for any of your trustees, your finance people, those who work with policy around safety in the church. Very many things that are easily translatable to lay people in their teams or committees. So I encourage you all to go to the website. And also, I've learned a lot in reviews of the insurance by having the insurance board send a loss prevention person out to take a look at the specific campus of a church and to give the pointers of the things that could cause electrical hazard or water hazard. To know that ahead of time, specifically what to change without having it count against you in any way. So if you haven't had your policy reviewed recently, I would encourage asking for that service.
Jane, thank you very much for your kind words. We have, I have benefited from the many people that came before me that really worked to understand, and a lot of these people were clergy who knew the church from the inside, to be able to put together an insurance program that is as broad as any you'll find in the industry. And that is our goal. It is to protect our churches. We run up against situations where we've had, for example, abuse claims that have been made, and the local church was insured with another carrier, one of the commercial carriers, and the conference was also named, and the conference was well protected by our policy, but the local church's policy didn't provide a lot of protection for them, and sometimes you don't realize how important insurance is until you actually need it, and it always seems like an additional cost burden for folks, and I understand that. Annie had mentioned me being moderator of my local UCC church. I actually just rolled off the beginning in February, actually the beginning of this year, but I was the moderator through the pandemic, and I understand costs are important for churches, but insurance is also one of those critical factors that if you don't have it and you have a situation where you really need some protection, it's peace of mind to have. Absolutely.
Aloha, Tim. We have one final question in chat. Someone is asking, can we use insurance for building or restoration?
Oh, sure. If you have a project, are you referring to? Like a renovation project at the church or a restoration project at the church? Insurance board can provide protection for that, yes.
We're going to wrap it up. We want to thank Tim so much for taking time out of his busy schedule. And I do want to let our folks know to please keep Tim and his family in your prayers. Tim's mother-in-law passed this morning. So he's taking time out of being with his family to be with us. So, thank you so much, Tim. Sorry we kept you a little longer than planned, but it was really important and really great information that you shared with us. So thank you very much. So friends, again, please keep Tim and his family in your prayers, and thank you for joining us. Tim's contact information is in the chat, but don't contact him today so he can be with his family. So thank you again. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.